How do you introduce guests on your podcast? I think there's two different types of ways that you could go about it. I've done both ways, and I'm going to let you know my preference on which way I like to do it. The first one is a guest sends you over a bio. You take that bio and you say, "Welcome to our podcast." And you can notice at our podcast, REI Marketing Secrets, if you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching it on YouTube and you haven't checked out the podcast, you can go watch out some of our YouTube videos that are created based on our podcast interviews. And initially, I would take the bio that the guest would read me, and I would say, "Welcome back to the REI Marketing Secrets podcast. Today on the show, we have Trevor Oldham. Trevor is the founder and CEO of Podcast U. Podcast U works with alternative investment companies to get booked on podcasts," and just go through the whole bio. And I found that with that process, that the guest was just sitting there and they were kind of just feeling like, okay, like, let's get the process started. Let me get on the show. And I just felt like it was almost like awkward. I didn't flow well. I'm sitting there with a piece of paper in my hand, or if I have it up on my computer and just reading it, where I found the sweet spot for me when it came to introducing guests on the podcast was go through. And now, once the guest is on the show, hit the record button. "Hey, everyone, welcome back to the RI Marketing Secrets podcast. Today on the show, we have Trevor Oldham." Trevor, for our audience out there who might not know who you are, do you mind giving us some background information on who you are and what you do? I find that that just creates a better answer overall than what's going to be in their bio. Typically, they're going to dig a little deeper, they're going to go more into their backstory. And I find that that works best for me. And it's just a great way to kick off the podcast. There's not a lot behind it. It's just the guest getting into the groove. It's me getting into the groove as a host. And then conversely, what I like to do is now have an intro for them where now I'm going through after the interview has completed. I have my notes written down. I know what I talked about with the guest. I'm going to go through and I'm going to record the intro like pretty much as soon as the interview is done because I have it all in my head. It's going to be hard for me to go back and think about everything that we talked about the next day, the next morning, even a couple hours from now. So I'll go through and I'll say, "Hey everyone, I just got off this podcast interview with Trevor Oldham. He specializes in helping alternative investment companies get booked on podcasts. Like, it was a super impactful interview. We talked about like how to create your pitch, why you should create a one sheet, how to track your leads, how long it takes to see success, everything you need to know within this episode, everything you need to know about how to be a guest on a podcast, how to get yourself booked on podcasts. That's what's going to be featured in today's podcast episode. So without further ado, let's hop into the episode. And then that's where I say, "Hey everyone, welcome back to the REI Marketing Secrets podcast. Today on the show, we had Trevor Oldham. Trevor, give an introduction for yourself." And I find that that works good because then now the audience can really know what to expect. They can know, hey, giving them a short 30-second, 60-second overview. I know if I listen to that, I know what the episode's going to be about. I know I'm going to want to stick around. It's not going to just be like an infomercial or a sales commercial about the guest that they're bringing on. The podcast host is interviewing. It's going to be an impactful interview. And I find that structuring it up, quick 30, 60-second intro overview of the episode after I've recorded the episode, and then just having the guests introduce themselves a little bit more. I find that that works better than any just generic bio that I'm going to get. But I hope that helps you to understand, hey, here's an idea of how you could start introducing guests on your podcast.